Now, keep in mind, this is for church audiences in a church, most likely in a church building, so you have to keep it well, not even PG, rated G. So, the lovers are sleeping with each other on the couch. The husband gets off work early. And one of the things I want you to notice is how the film is shot. We see the husband coming in. He then discovers the lover's clothes, and the film will follow the actors from left and then follow them to the right. The husband is angry, and we are told that the wages of sin is death. He has a gun, and we know she was a bad wife because he said, I knew I'd catch you sooner or later. And we know that they meet a terrible end because many of the sinners on the hellbound train meet with a very bad end. Now compare this with contrast this with Heaven-Bound Travelers, when the wife, played by Eloyce, was entertaining visitors, including a gentleman. Her character was falsely accused of being untrue by a jealous husband. Compared with Heaven-Bound Now, prior to this scene, Eloyce's character, the wife, proclaims her desire to be a Christian. She then begins to have visitors, for she is visited by women, and in this scene, a man. The visitors gave gifts, and it's not clear how it relates to being a Christian, maybe the gifts that we all give to each other. But going to the scene, notice how all three characters are in one shot, and it doesn't really follow people around. We know the wife is innocent in this, but her husband doesn't believe her. Despite his anger, the husband handed the man his coat and hat and showed him the door. The couple argued, he packs his bags, and he leaves. Keeping with her softer and more pro-female point of view, the wife is innocent. The husband's anger is not expressed with violence, as with Hellbound Train, but with abandonment. I have another example. Eloyce shifting the tone, removing the glaring judgment she herself may have felt as a single mother found in Hellbound Train, and it's replaced with grace and forgiveness. In the Hellbound Train, there's a disapproving tone to unmarried women who have children, as seen here. In contrast, Verdict Not Guilty presents the unwed mother, but as the title gave away, despite all of her sins, she is found not guilty. And this accusation, another baby and no husband, bad woman, is spoken by the prosecutor, who is one of the villains of the story. Despite all of her work, Eloyce received no credit during her lifetime. In NAACP correspondence, seen above, and newspaper accounts, seen below, James E. Gist got the credit for Verdict Not Guilty. Even after James E. Gist's death in 1937 and Eloyce's marriage to Arthur Wood in 1939, the show still went on, with the Gist name. After his death, it was Mrs. James E. Gist presenting the film. Even after she married projectionist Arthur Wood in December 1939, the couple held on to the Gist name, running the Gist Moving Picture Company and appearing as the Gists in the 1940 census. As I said, census doesn't always get it right. But no new Gist films were created. By the 1940s, silent films were long since passé. The driving force behind Hellbound Train, its preaching tour, James Gist, had died, so a few years later, the Hellbound Train pulled into the station and ended its run. Because these films were amateur created, not distributed to theaters or to others, there was no chance of them being uncovered in an abandoned bijou or collector's attic. As Eloyce was not a Christian, but Baha'i, It is doubtful she had the same connections to the community the films targeted as her late husband did. Instead, they sat with Eloyce for about 3 decades and would have been lost to a fire had it not been for some good luck. Oops. The films resurfaced when she lent them to her grandson, Patrick Harrison, pictured here, who happened to have worked for the Library of Congress. In 1974, Harrison loaned the films to David Parker of the Library of Congress's Motion Picture Section, who then loaned them to Larry Carr of the American Film Institute, AFI. While her films were in the hands of institutions, she died while on vacation. After her death, the house at 134 R Street was damaged by an arsonist fire. If it had not been for her grandson's efforts, the Hellbound Train trilogy could have been lost forever. The films arrived in poor shape. They were falling apart along many splices with A and B wines attached to each other. They were also mixed in with professional or commercial films. Carr of the AFI assessed the films, which were mixed in with newsreels and cartoon shorts. About the Gist films, Carr wrote, "Not Guilty and Hellbound Train appear to be camera original reversal prints, which were edited into shows Mrs. Gist took around the South. They were made on the amateur level, using members of her family, etc. As such, they are clearly of interest. However, the footage is somewhat chewed up, dirty, buckled, shrunken, etc., and we need to determine if it can be copied." In 1975, about the Gist films and their availability, I skipped something. In 1975, Thomas Cripps at Morgan State University College in Baltimore, Maryland, reached out to David Parker and the Library of Congress to inquire about the Gist films and their availability. Cripps was an authority on early African American film and author of Slow Fade to Black, The Negro in American Film, 1900 to 1942, published in 1977, and said, "I do not think it is in a condition to allow a fair estimate of its artistic merit. However, its very existence is a treatment to a lost thread of Afro-American history." It isn't clear how much of the raw film Cripps viewed, as he wrote in his 1978 book, Black Film as Genre, the best single example of Black film seen as pure product, produced by Blacks for Blacks, and with an ambition to advance the image or cause of the race, is the fragmented evangelistic film of Eloyce Gist. And then nothing happened. Which happens at archives. An accession comes through the door and can sit on the shelf untouched for years. Sometimes the reason is funding, staffing, or backlog. The Gist films were identified and received some minimal processing. With that, the Library of Congress had several 16mm reels, which were broken up in over 100 fragments. So, nothing happened with the Gist films until 1991. One of the Library of Congress's junior fellows, summer interns from Howard University, Kimberly McCall, gathered information about the Gist films. She found the NAACP correspondence in the manuscript division of the Library of Congress between James Gist and Assistant Secretary Roy Wilkins, and she also had a brief telephone interview with Eloyce's daughter, ASALH Harrison. Regarding the films themselves, she was responsible for sequencing of the fragments so the film could be transferred to videotape and made accessible. McCall made a rough shot list for a role identified as the Hellbound Train. Building on McCall's work, Library of Congress Motion Picture Section Fellow Amy Kiel Petrine had a more lengthy telephone interview with ASALH Harrison. From this interview, more was revealed about her mother's involvement and her role. Contemporary sources from the 1930s hid or diminished Eloyce. Harrison mentioned that her mother rewrote and re-edited the Hellbound Train production and produced, wrote, and directed a second feature, Verdict Not Guilty. Petrine returned to the Library of Congress's motion picture section in the summer of 1992 with the goal of restoring Hellbound Train. She worked under Harriet Harrison, Patrick's wife, and Eloyce's granddaughter-in-law. It isn't clear if Petrine or a previous staffer wrote up the 441 pages of handwritten notes for the Gist films, but at this point there were 21 reels broken out into 115 fragments of varying lengths and a compiled reel of about 400 feet labeled Hellbound Train and Verdict Not Guilty. Later in the summer of 1993, Petrine produced another shot list for Hellbound Train. In June 1993, Professor Gloria J. Gibson Hudson requested access to the film, thus created a need to transfer Hellbound Train to videotape. Film was sent to the lab for transfer, and the lab noted extremely poor film prints. Most title captions were reversed and required A/B correction. A 1-inch master and half-inch VHS tape of Hellbound Train were produced in the November of 1993. According to Howard University professor and filmmaker S. Tortino Berry, Gibson Hudson reached out to him in 1996. In the summer of 97, Berry began re-editing Hellbound Train based on the film transfers. He added an original score to the silent film and premiered his edit at the 1998 National Black Arts Film Festival in Atlanta. The response from the festival audience was underwhelming. However, this and Gibson's efforts brought more attention to the Gist session. In 1999, the Library of Congress restarted the restoration effort. In 2000, the Library of Congress received a grant from the National Film Preservation Foundation to restore Hellbound Train. During this effort, staff discovered portions were missing, according to the handwritten notes from 2001. But a little later, once everything was accounted for, they discovered portions of Verdict Not Guilty and Heaven-Bound Travelers within the mishmash of differing shots. In his remarks made at the 2013 annual Northeast Historic Film Summer Symposium, Brian Graney of the Black Film Center at Indiana University noted that Eloyce Gist was only recognized as a filmmaker in the late 20th century. This could put into question her title as of early Black cinema foremother. Eloyce Gist was an early African-American filmmaker, and her work, that is her voice, tells a story that was not uncovered until restorers put the Hellbound Train puzzle back together. When the fragments for Hellbound Train were finally placed in a format where they could be analyzed, staff discovered Verdict Not Guilty and the lesser-known Heaven-Bound Travelers. With these two shorts, differing in style and tone, featuring Eloyce Gist, it strongly states that these films are hers. If not for the preservation work at the Library of Congress, we would not have her daughter's testimony that she was involved in the Hellbound Train experience and directing the shorts. Taking into account what was discovered in the restoration process, Eloyce King Patrick Gist was definitely a filmmaker worthy of the credit. So in conclusion, what other Black female filmmakers are languishing on archival shelves? Whose history is slowly fading away as deterioration eats at neglected reels and fragments? It is one thing to read about early filmmakers, but being able to access their work provides a whole nother side and gives researchers something to analyze. I want to thank all those who labor in archives and other cultural institutions, who bring forth forgotten or unrecognized artists such as Eloyce Gist. Thank you.